Hey there, welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. Art Burns here, you there. So delighted to be here with you today. And, we've covered a lot this week. We've talked about the conditions of happiness. We've talked about what happened to that poor guy in a public display of just losing it, the same way that we've all lost it at some point or other. But to see somebody do it on national television and, hopefully that inspired you to feel a little bit of compassion for the person and maybe find that part of you that might have not initially felt that compassion. Where is that coming from, right? And we also talked about a couple other great subjects. I'm going to go through my notes so I don't miss any of them. But we talked about the Piers Morgan thing, and then we talked about the way that being present and living in mindfulness can really open us up to various hobbies that we can have, and how these hobbies can add a flavor and a dimension to our life that is really really enjoyable, and how but it's the letting go of all of the stress and the distracting thoughts and all the tendencies of our mind to kind of do those things that allows for us to pick up a hobby that can add that sweet color to our lives and to our relationships, right? And then yesterday I talked to you about my new teacup. It says "Don't hurry, be happy," and how I hope that doesn't come up as the thumbnail again, because that was yesterday's thumbnail. That'll be awkward. But we talked about how the sloth is the greatest animal ever, because the sloth lives in the present moment, and he does not, or she does not, strive for things. She just allows things to arise in life. And how that is really the key component of mindfulness. That's really what it's all about. It's all about just being able to again allow for things to arise in our lives, right? And keeping an open sort of curiosity about what is going to arise, and that open curiosity allows for things like acceptance, which then ultimately allows us to forgive ourselves for things, and to allow ourselves to be okay with in the face of both our exciting achievements, and also our sometimes devastating failures, right? And so it's about again, mindfulness is about sort of remaining open to the fact that life is going to be a mixture of all of it, right? It's going to be the really happy and beautiful and pleasurable times, and it's also going to be the unhappy and difficult times, and everything in between. And that's what life is. And when we can live with mindfulness, it means to accept that that's what life is going to be. And so when we accept it, then we're not clinging to the good times and hoping that they never end, and we're not being aversive towards the bad times or the unpleasant times, and hoping that they never happen, right? Instead, it's being curious and allowing these things to arise, just like a sloth, right? And so today, I thought it would be a really cool sort of time to give you a little practice that is. This practice is probably my favorite of all, right? And I learned it first through Jack Kornfield. He writes about it in his wonderful book called The Wise Heart. And it's a book that I recommend to all of you. If you're in, you get the audiobook. If you're not into reading, just so many really beautiful, beautiful lessons in this book. It's actually, let me get it real quick. The subtitle is so it's called The Wise Heart. Get that in front of the screen here for you so you can see it. The Wise Heart, a guide to the universal teachings of Buddhist psychology. And a lot of people don't think of Buddhism as a psychology, or that there is a psychology to Buddhism, but there is, and it's very much it's like you can look at what Buddhism was teaching the world about psychology for a couple of thousand years, that now modern psychology is kind of mirroring a lot of what this what Buddhist psychology has been again espousing for a very very long time. So check out the book. It's really beautiful. It's got some great one of the beautiful things about Jack Kornfield's books, and many books in mindfulness and meditation is that at the end of each at the end of each chapter, there's usually a practice of some sort, and sometimes the practice is just something that you'll kind of read and just sort of sit with a certain contemplation of a certain idea, and then other times it's actually a meditation, and so the practice that I want to talk to you about today is, again, I first learned it through this book called The Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield, but I've also heard it used a lot by Tara Brach, who's the author of Radical Acceptance, Radical Compassion, also a very, very amazing teacher. And I've heard it, the rain the practice is called rain, and I've heard it in many, many different sort of forms and contexts. And so the practice of rain, okay, rain, first of all, is an acronym, and it signifies recognition, acceptance, investigation, and non-identification. I know it's something I've talked about here, but it's been a while, so I thought maybe y'all, I know I've got some new subscribers here to the YouTube channel, and always, new listeners to the podcast, so I thought it would be good to sort of review this practice again. And in many ways, the practice of rain is illustrative. It illustrates mindfulness in general, right? Really, like when I walk you through this practice, I want you to kind of consider how this is, mindfulness. This is the way that we can process things when we're, practicing mindfulness. So in a lot of ways, rain becomes kind of the all inclusive practice, right? And it's almost like a practice within a practice. And so it's something I use with all of my clients at some point or other. But again, I actually use the different parts of the rain practice in different practices to sort of, cultivate this way of living with mindfulness. Okay, so let's go through the practice. Okay, now generally speaking, like I said, this process is really how we can experience everything in our lives, right? But one of the main ways that I've used this particular practice, is all these things are put together, is sort of when something is, happens in your life that is offering a challenge to you, right? You might use the word, something's cooking, right? Something's just agitating you somehow, right? Maybe it's something that you experienced externally, maybe like for me, the last time I used this practice, well, actually, I think I used it pretty recently, but one of the more memorable times that I can recall using this practice was from, a little bit over a year ago, before the pandemic struck and everything kind of got locked down and everything. My son was kind of getting into Little League baseball, and it just so happened that we had an experience. He wound up on this team that was run by a coach who was, I mean, you would have thought this guy was coaching a Major League Baseball team. Like he would yell at the kids. He was really harsh on them. And it turned out to be a very unpleasant experience for my son, and really kind of emotionally challenging for him. And I just hope that one day he's going to get back into baseball, because he was really, really good at it. He's got a heck of an arm, and he can swing the bat too. But this, at the time when I was grappling with this, and it was really hard for me, because, the circumstances and the event that really kind of spurred all this is that, during the last game of the season, it was like the playoffs, and, like 10-year-old kids and 8-year-old kids playing playoff baseball, like that's how the coach was, though, and he really wanted to win this game, because this was like the championship game that, again, 9-year-old kids, it meant nothing, but after my son was on his way to the bat, and the coach said, they had like bases loaded or something. The coach said, just don't swing at anything. Just let the ball go by, because the pitcher is not going to pitch strikes and will walk in a run. So just let it go. Of course, that's not how I would approach it. I mean, kids are there to have fun, swing the bat, have fun. And so my son did that. He swung the bat, and he swung 3 times, and he struck out. Okay. Well, this coach just absolutely got into his face. I mean, seriously, he looked like some, like you watch on TV, where some of these managers of baseball teams, like red face screaming, it was like almost at that level. And at the time it posed a real difficulty for me, as a man, as the father, the protector of my son and everything. It was really hard for me to navigate, how to, protect my son, remove him from that situation, but also, kind of, be compassionate for the whole situation too. It was really, really difficult for me. And it was something that even after we left, and we did, I pulled him out of the game. I was like, okay, we don't have to, he was like, I want to leave. I don't want to play this game. He was crying. And I was like, okay, let's go, get your stuff. Let's go. I'm not going to make you do this, but in the days, after that, it was really, it was a difficult time for me, again, just sort of grappling. And this happens to a lot of us, right? Like when something happens, a big, extreme circumstance, a big extreme experience like that happens, in the moment, right? Our nervous system is haywire, right? We're in the sympathetic nervous system where our bodies are all revved up in the stress response, and we're in a place where we're not making good decisions. We're not even really aware necessarily of what's happening. And so it's very normal then for the next few days for us to look back and be like, oh, I should have handled it this way. I should have done this. I should have, I could have done that. I could have, just like we say, in the quote by Viktor Frankl yesterday, right? That in between the stimulus, in between seeing, your kid getting yelled at and the response to that is a space. And thankfully I honored that space, and I didn't, yell at the coach. I didn't do something like, violent of my own, which back in the day, I mean, going back 10, 15 years ago, that's how that would have played out. There probably would have been police involved at some point. And that's not good, right? So while I'm happy that I was able to respond rather than react, there was still that sort of aftermath of like, gosh, should I have said something to the guy, or should I have done this, or should I have done that, or shouldn't I have done this? And when you start going through that, the natural tendency then is to start feeling at fault, right? And start really identifying with the whole thing, right? And then, of course, in that identification and in that fault, the feeling that you're at fault, that's when, we get into shame, right? And we get into, really just some very unproductive emotions that come from that, right? And not to say that shame is never a productive moment, but emotion rather. But in this particular case, what it does is it clouds our ability to understand what really happened, right? And so rain is the practice that will allow you not only to see past the shame and all these emotions, it actually, one of the steps in the practice is to actually, investigate those emotions. but not only does it allow you to see past the shame, but in that process of seeing past the shame, you can then make sense of the situation, and you can actually grow and learn through what has happened. Now, as I said, really, rain becomes the way in which we always, can practice mindfulness, right? It really is a sort of an illustration of how mindfulness really works, right? But in the early days, or when something big happens like that, I really recommend that you use this practice to just sort of, work through things and kind of, resolve things in your mind. Now, many people will use this as a journaling exercise, right? You can just go through the steps and just write it all out. Very, very helpful. It gives you something to read back. It gives you something, just writing it out gives you that chance to kind of, just release it from your body in a way. So that's a great way to do it, but I've not really done it as a journaling exercise. I've just done it as sort of a thought exercise. I mean, I guess I've tried the journaling once or twice, but mostly I just do it like while I'm riding my bike. I just go through the processes of rain. So it can be looked at as sort of a semi-formal practice as well. and to be sure, I've also led meditations that go through the rain process, and that's something that Tara Brach does a lot too. So it can also be a formal meditation practice. So that's really, again, because it's such an essential kind of concept of mindfulness, it can be used in all these different ways. And so however you choose to use it, I'm going to go through the process with you right now, okay? Now, again, if you're looking for a great text on it, The Wise Heart is your go-to, okay? It's chapter... I don't know where it is. It's not far into the book because, again, it's so essential to what's going on. So anyway, I don't want to flip through this book. I'll get lost in that. But anyway, so here's how the practice works. Okay, remember, RAIN is an acronym, right, that stands for recognition, acceptance, investigation, and non-identification. Okay, and again, this is how, if we can put every experience we have through this process, then we're living mindfully, and we're probably suffering a lot less, and we're probably feeling a lot more calm. We're probably feeling a lot less stress. We're probably feeling a lot more emotionally aware and in tune and emotionally available to others, right? Because that's the thing, right? Like while you're trying to resolve that thing of that coach yelling at your kid, you're not really present with everything that's going on. And that's the whole point of this podcast, right? Is to be present, to show up to our life all the time and be here, be available to our lives. All right, so here's how the practice goes. So the first step is recognition. Okay, so I'll just walk through it in the. I'll use the experience that I had with my son back a year and a half ago, wherever it was. So just kind of illustrate it that way. So the first step is recognition. Okay, so just recognizing. This is a difficulty. This is something that happened. I watched my son getting yelled at, and it really bothered me. Okay, so I'm recognizing that, right? I'm calling it out, because that is what mindfulness is, right? Mindfulness is turning towards the difficulty and facing it and seeing it for what it really is. Okay, so that's the first very simple step, is just to bring an intentional recognition to what has happened. Okay. Now the next step is acceptance, which again, this is integral to the whole concept of mindfulness as well, right? That as we pay attention to what's happening, what's arising in the present moment, we adopt an accepting attitude or posture towards towards whatever it is that's arising, right? So the idea is not that we're resigning ourselves, that we're never going to fix something, we're never going to improve, we're never going to, address this thing that happened, right? But what it is it's accepting that this has really happened. Because what happens is if I sit here and say, oh, no, this coach can't be yelling at my son, that's not I can't allow that. Well, then what I'm doing is now I'm going off on a different direction, and I'm never going to really understand what's happened. Right? Because I'm so busy, kind of grappling with this idea of like, what do I do about this? I got to get retribution. I got to set this guy straight, call the police, whatever it is, Now, of course, if something is happening and you need to call the police, I mean, yeah, you're not going to sit there and say, oh, no, I just got to accept it. No, I mean, if there's something legitimately that somebody's in danger or something needs to happen here, well then yeah, by all means go for that. I mean, that's not what acceptance means. Acceptance just means that instead of feeling aversive towards this thing, that you're just accepting what the thing is. Okay, so recognition and acceptance, those are the very easy steps to this, or simple steps, I should say. Not necessarily easy, but simple. and I make sure to say that because I don't want you to feel like, like you're doing something wrong, right? And that's never the case, okay? So now we get to investigation, right? Now, again, this is where mindfulness really, kind of arises through this practice, right? General mindfulness is what I mean by that. And so investigation, what we're going to do is we're going to investigate it basically in all the ways in which we can experience something, right? Everything that we experience, right? We experience in the body, we experience it in our emotions, and we experience it in our thoughts. Now, there's a fourth component to this that's a little less straightforward. And this fourth component, what Jack Kornfield will call it the Dharma, right? And the Dharma, it's a very multifaceted word. There's lots of different ways in which you could use the word Dharma in terms of there's lots of different meanings to it, if you will. But for the sake of our conversation here, the definition that I would offer for you is that Dharma is the sort of patterns and the sort of tendencies of our mind. Right. And I bring that up because it's the tendencies and the patterns of our mind actually influence the thoughts, the emotions and the sensations of our body. But we'll get to that in a second. So let's go through the 4 steps of investigation. Okay. You always start with the body because that's the most apparent thing, right? Like when we can sense into our body, which again, that's part of mindfulness practice, is to monitor what it is that we're feeling as we're feeling it, right? And so So when we experience anything, right, the first place we experience it is in our body, right? It's our nervous system. It's how we're reacting to this thing that we're experiencing, right? So as you're investigating, this thing that happened. So my son got yelled at. I've accepted that this is what happened, even though I don't like it. I've accepted it, right? Now I'm going to investigate, and in my body, where do I feel this experience, right? Like when I think back to that moment of when my son had this guy in his face, where do I feel that? Right now, for me, it was a tightness in my chest. It was even a redness in my ears, like a heat in my ears, right? And maybe even like my face tightening up. These are the kinds of feelings that I had, right? Now, your feelings are going to be different, right? And that's again because of the patterns. We'll get to that in a second. But your feelings are your feelings. My feelings are my feelings. They might match up. It's possible, but it's very unlikely. It's also extremely likely that they won't, right? And so the idea then is to check in with your body and see where you're processing this thing. Okay. And it's really, it's maybe not so much as, like take a deep look. What I like to tell people is, kind of scan your whole body and see what you find, right? Because a lot of times, I might feel like the tightness in my chest or something in my throat or my ears or whatever. I might feel that one thing, but there could be a lot of other sensations that are happening as well. So kind of, I recommend that you do like a scan of your body. Now that can be done in two different ways, right? You can either, do like a foot to head or a head to foot kind of thing, where you're just systematically going throughout your whole body and just noticing where you're picking up any feelings that relate to this experience, right? But you could also take a more sort of meandering approach, right? And this is the one that I like a lot. I picture myself like my body is like a house that I'm walking into for the first time, like an empty house that you're thinking about renting or buying, right? First thing you do, you just walk through, you look in all the different rooms, all the different closets, you open the cabinets, you look inside, just checking out what you find, right? You're not expecting to find anything specific. You're not hoping to find anything specific. Maybe you're hoping for good light or something like that, but really you're just checking it out. And so that's the idea. That's the nature of the investigation of the body, is just to check it out and see what you find. All right. Now, after we've done this, after we've kind of noticed all the different physical sensations that we have as we're contemplating this experience that we've gone through, now we're going to shift to the second place of investigation, which is our emotions. Right now, just like the physical sensations of the body, normally with emotions, or usually with emotions, there's like one or two emotions that we can really feel, right? Like this is obvious. Like I feel anger right now. Like that's right here. It's first, right in the forefront, right? But emotions are tricky, right? And just like the physical sensations of the body, oftentimes there's a cornucopia of emotions, right? There's a lot of different underlying emotions. So spending a few moments and really looking into this, okay? So yes, I felt anger at the fact that this guy was yelling at my son, but I also felt a little shame that I was the boy's father and I didn't protect him. I didn't get in front of that. I felt shame. I felt guilt about that too. I felt fear that what is this going to teach my son? Like what did my example teach my son? How did the way that I didn't react, was that a bad lesson for my son to see? I'm afraid of that, right? What else was I feeling? I was feeling dread. I was feeling like a real a palpable dread of like how I deal with this moving forward. And so the point is that there's a lot of different emotions, right, that can be present, and that usually are. So take a few moments and really dig deep and try to see all the different emotions that might be involved with this experience. Okay. Now we turn to the thoughts, right? And the reason why we do it in this order, right? The really easy or sort of simple ones to see is the body, right? Now we go to the emotions, which are a little more elusive, a little more nebulous, if you will, right? A little more foggy. And now we go to our thoughts, and the thoughts are really foggy sometimes and really confusing, right? A lot of times the thoughts are running through our minds so fast that we can barely even see them, right? And so taking a few moments and really investigating the thoughts that are happening. Once you start paying attention to your thoughts, you sense like a slowing down a little bit. And you might even start to see like where one thought ends and another begins kind of thing. That's not important if you don't get that, but you might occur to you that you're seeing that. But most of all, what you're going to do in this investigation, right? You're going to ask yourself a couple of really important questions, right? Because what you're doing, again, the nature of investigation is a curiosity, right? And it's about trying to see, you know, trying to understand something, right? Which we can't understand something if we're dictating what that thing is, right? We have to be open and we have to be, kind of, curious about what it is, right? And so as we're going through this investigation of our thoughts, we can ask ourselves a couple of really important questions. Okay, number one is, are the thoughts that I'm having about this, are they true? Right? Because they're not necessarily, and we're gonna get into that in the next step here. But are they true? Like just asking yourself, like, are the thoughts that I'm having true? My thoughts of the thing with my son. Like I'm thinking that somehow I have failed as a father because I didn't jump out onto the baseball field and get in between my son and this guy. Is that true? Is that thought real? Is it true? And even more importantly, the second question we can ask ourselves is, what if the exact opposite of what I think is true? Right? What if the best thing I could have done was to stay exactly where I am, to let my son experience this? What if that's the best thing that could be done for him? Again, we're not looking for an answer, right? We're investigating. So I guess we're ultimately looking for some kind of answer in investigation, but really it's about asking the questions and again, seeing what arises from the questions. Okay. That's the point of the investigation, right? Now we get to as Jack Kornfield calls it, the Dharma, which I would call it the pattern, the nature of, or the pattern-based nature of the human mind. Okay. Let's call it that. Because what happens is, the thoughts that I have, the reason I think that, oh man, I should have gotten in front of that coach with my son, the reason I have that thought is not mine, right? The reason I have that thought is because of what's happened in my life, right? As I've experienced, my own, experiences with my parents. Did my parents not jump in front of a coach who was yelling at me one time and I felt that they should have, right? Or is it, just the way that I've seen my father and my mother deal with other people, right? That's influencing how I think about what I've done here. Right. And so when we kind of examine these patterns and what you're doing when you're investigating these patterns, you're looking for, like, is this familiar? Do I feel like this has happened before? Like, have I been in situations like this before where I'm having similar thoughts that I had similar thoughts then that I'm having now? Right. And notice that kind of pattern, right? Notice the pattern. Because that pattern has a lot of information in it. And it tells us a lot about how our minds unconsciously react to things, right? And once we get into that place and we're investigating the way in which my mind is doing these things without my contribution and without my involvement, right? Like my mind doesn't ask me for permission to think that, oh man, I'm letting my son down. And, nobody came to me and said, hey, is this thought okay? You cool with this? No, it just happened. And we don't know where it comes from, right? Except the key of what we do know of where it comes from is it comes from these patterns, this programming that we've lived with. Maybe that's even a better word to use instead of dharma, is programming, right? So in the first 7 years of our lives as human beings, we're programmed by what we see around us, right? And that forms the basis of the thoughts, the emotions, and the physical sensations of the body. The other thing that we notice in this investigation is that we see a connection between all these things, right? We see a connection between the patterns and the fact that, yeah, I'm feeling this way because I didn't like the way my dad let the coach yell at me when I was 7 years old, right? And so once we see this, we see how this whole thing influences each other. But most importantly, we see that it's not us, right? It's not something that we're like nobody called for an appointment to go through these thoughts and emotions, right? They're just happening. So if I'm not making them happen, right? It's like the old Scooby-Doo cartoon, right? Well, if you're not driving the bus and I'm not driving the bus, then who's driving the bus? Right? And the reality is that in many ways, the bus is being driven by these patterns, this programming, these tendencies that we have that, again, have very little to do with us as far as our intentional selves go. Okay, now that brings us to the N in RAIN, which is non-identification. And this is so crucial, okay, that when we can disidentify from the experience that we're having and from the emotions that we're feeling, the thoughts that we're having, the physical sensations we're feeling as a result of this thing that's happened, right? When we can disidentify with it, right? Like, again, seeing the patterns and seeing the tendencies and the programming tells us that, okay, it's not me that's making all this happen, right? It's not me that's creating all this turmoil in my mind. It's happening as a result of something that I didn't have any control over, right? And so now we can say that this is not mine. I don't have to carry it, right? I can actually I can just release it. I can put it down on the desk. I can look at it from all different angles. I can now coexist with it, knowing that I don't own it and it doesn't own me. And now we can, in this place of non-identification, now we can really be objective and unjudging of what we're going through, judging ourselves or others. And now we can truly learn about it. Now we can truly come up with these concepts of saying, like, yeah, well, no, it wasn't me, right? These emotions that I'm feeling, they're not right. The thoughts that I'm having, they're not accurate, and it's all because of not something that I did. And I shouldn't then carry that. And now I can move on with my life having learned and grown through this experience, rather than just carrying the experience with me and constantly grappling and thinking and ruminating and challenging and berating and all these different things that we do for days and days and days and days and days, right? Because those days and days and days and days and days are times where we're not going to be present with our lives. So instead, how long did it take us? It took us 15 minutes to go through that process, but I was explaining each step. Literally, you can do this in 5 minutes. You can do it probably in 30 seconds if you really, after you've done it a few times, right? So spend the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, going through a practice like this so that you can release yourself from it for the next week or month or year or lifetime, right? That's how mindfulness works. All right. So I expect you to have questions about this. I really do, because this is not, it's a tricky podcast subject. I'm out on a limb here with this one. But it's not an easy thing to just, get. So I expect you have some questions. And if you do have questions, I'm going to put a link in the description that all of you know by now, because many of you have used this. You can talk to me. Okay, we can set up a call where we talk just about this practice, or we could talk about anything else that you want to talk about. All right. If you would like the written instructions, I basically paraphrased and interpreted what I've learned from this brilliant man, and I have that in a document that I can send to you. And also, you can also email me if you have any questions. Okay, art@artburnscoaching.com. All right, everybody. So I'll put that link in the description here, along with a bunch of other links that I hope you find helpful. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for listening. I wish you well. I'll be back again next week. I hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend. I hope you spend time with yourself and with family and with your pets and your plants. And I hope you enjoy every moment. And I promise you that if you attend to every moment, then there's a much bigger chance that you're going to enjoy every moment. So try to be present, try to be accepting of what arises in the present moment. Practice being compassionate towards yourself and towards others, and most of all, practice being curious. All right, everybody, thank you again. I wish you well. I'll be back again. Bye.